decisions in relation to those portfolios.
I thank the Prime Minister. The member for Gorton has the call.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Yesterday, Sky News reported two of the Prime Minister's best mates received $80,000 of taxpayer money without a tender to set up their own private sector quarantine business known as Quarantine Services Australia. Sky News also reported that Home Affairs Secretary Mike Pezzullo told business leaders this was a really important project for the Prime Minister. Is Mr Pezzullo right?
The Leader of the House on a point of order.
Well, Mr Speaker, on the question that's been asked, there is an imputation in the question that's implied quite clearly in the question, and that is against the standing orders. That's the first point, Mr Speaker, and if there are allegations to make, then those allegations should be put in another forum, not here in this House.
I never know what you think.
The Manager of Opposition Business.
Thanks very much, Mr Speaker.
Quarantine Services Australia.
Ministers are expected to be across media reports. The question, and that's in practice, the question specifically goes to a media report and describes the source. It then refers to that particular payment being a priority for the Prime Minister as being attributed to the Secretary of a department, and simply asks whether that is accurate. It goes no further than asking whether it was a really important project for the Prime Minister. And so the extra layers that the Leader of the House is referring to are not in the question that was just asked.
Standing Order 100D(3) and 4 refers to inferences and imputations. It's certainly sailing close to the wind. The question. Yeah, I'll allow the Prime Minister to answer the question. I mean, the Prime Minister has the call.
Yeah, Mr Speaker, and on the standing orders matters, I mean that's a matter for the Speaker, and I haven't seen this report, Mr Speaker, that they refer to. What I can say is that at all times I and my ministers rightly declare any possible interest that may relate to matters that are being considered in the Cabinet as the standing first item on every single agenda of every Cabinet meeting, exactly right. And I call for that at every single meeting, as Cabinet ministers will understand. I can't speak to comments made by others that I have no knowledge of whatsoever, Mr Speaker. All I know that I have always fully disclosed any interests where they are relevant to any matter that I may be considering, and the suggestion otherwise is a disgraceful slur by a grubby opposition.
The member for Lindsay has the call.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Australians, like those in my Western Sydney community of Lindsay, have rolled up their sleeves to help make our nation one of the most highly vaccinated countries in the world against COVID-19. Will the Prime Minister outline how this tremendous effort means we can safely live with the virus and look ahead to 2022 with confidence for a stronger future under the Morrison government's strong management?
The Prime Minister has
Thank you, Mr Speaker. As we come towards the end of this parliamentary year and towards the end of 2021, Mr Speaker, We are moving forward into 2022, looking firmly out through the front windscreen, Mr Speaker, as Australians are as they look forward to this Christmas and summer period, Mr Speaker. The lockdowns and difficult times of the last 18 months, Mr Speaker, are in the rear vision mirror because we're moving into 2022, Mr Speaker, with a stronger economy emerging, with Australians getting back into jobs. And today, Mr Speaker, over 20 million Australians have now had their first vaccination, Mr Speaker. And I want to thank all those Australians, Mr Speaker, for the amazing job they have done, and in particular the member for Lindsay will know just how many sacrifices and the work done by people in her community and by members all across this place. And I want to sincerely thank Australians, Mr Speaker, for the amazing job that they have done over these past difficult 18 months to 2 years. We thank Australians for rolling up their sleeves to get this jab, because under the national plan that means we can open safely and we can remain safely open as we go into 2022 and those jobs come back, the businesses come back, the livelihoods come back, Mr Speaker, and Australians can plan for their future with confidence under the strong economic management of our government looking forward. Now, Mr Speaker, I want to thank those Australians for doing their bit and playing their part, but especially our health workers, our nurses, our doctors, our pharmacists who have been out there every single day, Mr Speaker. And I want to thank our Indigenous communities and our Indigenous leaders, Mr Speaker, for the way that they have worked hard to keep their communities safe and work so closely with governments around the country. I want to thank those mental health support workers, Mr Speaker, who have been on the end of phones and have been reaching out to Australians, have been doing it tough, and particularly whether they be young people especially, Mr Speaker. I want to thank particular Headspace and the work done by Lifeline and Kids Helpline and Beyond Blue, Mr Speaker. They have been true heroes of this pandemic. I want to thank the transport workers who've kept our country moving. I want to thank the Royal Flying Doctor Service, Mr Speaker. I want to thank the cleaners who have carried an extra responsibility. I don't know why they're interjecting, Mr Speaker. I don't know why they've got a problem with me thanking cleaners for doing this work that we need them to do.
Member for Whitlam.
Mr Speaker, I want to thank the students and the teachers for their forbearance. I want to thank all of those, the businesses who have kept their businesses going and keeping their employees in jobs. I want to thank all those at Qantas and Virgin and Rex and others who kept planes flying. I want to thank the Australian Defence Force and the Australian Border Force, Mr Speaker, for the great work they've done. And I want to thank the great people of our public service, the Chief Medical Officer, the secretaries of our departments and all of those, Averett Services Australia in particular, who have provided that support. Thank you, Australia.
The Prime Minister's time has expired, and I give the call to the member for Gorton.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Can the Prime Minister confirm his government has awarded $80,000 to set up and run private luxury resort-style quarantine facilities? Can the Prime Minister confirm this quarantine business is being run out of his best mate's lobbying firm based at the Hotel Realm in Canberra?
The Minister for Home Affairs.
Thank you, Speaker. And can I start by saying that the Secretary of the Department of Home Affairs has been questioned about this particular issue twice at Senate estimates, once in October and the second time just a week ago. So there have been a range of questions that have put to the Secretary. The Secretary said that he was very clear. And what the Secretary said is, and I will actually quote from what Secretary Pizzullo said at Senate estimates. He said, quote, "It had nothing to do with ministers, their staff or ministerial officers." So he was very clear, and there is significantly more. And I would invite those people that have questions in relation to this matter to look at the Senate estimates transcript, because it makes it abundantly clear that any such contract was entered into directly by the Department of Home Affairs. It was done without my knowledge. The first I became aware of it was following the contract having been finalised. Now, we make no apology for the fact that we have looked at what
members
the best...
on my left. Members on my left. The Minister has the call.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. We make no apologies as a government that we did all that we possibly could to make sure that Australians were as protected as they possibly could be during this pandemic. Mr Speaker, the transcripts from Senate estimates clearly sets out what the arrangements were in relation to this contract. Thank you.
The member for Nichols has the call.
Thank you very much, Speaker. My question is to the Deputy Prime Minister. Will the Deputy Prime Minister please outline to the House how regional Australians have helped to drive the nation's recovery from the pandemic?
The Deputy Prime Minister has the call.
Well, Mr Speaker, I thank the honourable member for his question, and I was wanting to thank more people, but the Prime Minister hasn't really left me more people to thank. But Mr Speaker, obviously the member for Nichols is very aware of the work that is done, especially in the horticultural industry. We also know how important Shepparton is into the processing of so many of the foods that we eat. It's an incredibly important thing that the Australian people, through the time of the pandemic, which we hope that we are getting to, we are learning how to live with the virus, and that's the way the world's going to go. We have to move on. We have to get people back their rights, their liberties, their freedoms. We have to make sure that people live in the Australia they were born in. But one of the greatest freedoms they can have is the capacity to eat, the capacity to eat. And as people in regional Australia, farmers in regional Australia, especially in the seat of Nichols or in other seats, seat of the Riverina, seat of Parks, seat of Mallee, these are all incredibly important, that these people provide the most basic element of our liberties and our freedoms in Australia, and that is that we can feed ourselves. And not only do we feed ourselves, Mr Speaker, but we feed millions of others people around the world. And that is something truly to be thankful of. Likewise, the miners of so many parts of our nation, whether it's the iron ore miners, the coal miners, gas, gold, bauxite, copper, these are the ones who underpin our terms of trade and the value of our dollar that gives us the standard of living that we enjoy. In fact, we take as a birthright. These are the people putting product on the boat. And if people didn't put product on the boat, then all the imported accoutrements of our lives, from our phone to our fuel, to our car, to our clothes, we would not be getting them off the boat because there would be no value in our currency. So every day we note that these people, some who are derided, we thank them because they are the people that underpin the essence of wealth of our nation. Of our 10 biggest exports, one is from the service sector, all the others are mining or agriculture. We have to also note that this nation would not exist without the capacity of the thousands of miles and the kilometres, thousands of miles, kilometres, I suppose, that are travelled. We need the transport workers who do it. And the transport workers are a vital part of that. And I note the member for Wright, who's been hard at work. And I thank the member for Wright for all the work he's done. And it'd be good, and I'll thank myself to be a long way from the member of Wright when I can get home. But this has been a tough year. Finally, I think an incredibly important thing is we thank the families that have had to tolerate the issues pertinent to the pandemic, and also, and most importantly, those who've dealt with those who are the most vulnerable, the aged care sector, in regional areas. And Mr Speaker, you're the only one left, so thank you.
And also time has expired, and I give the call to the member for Gorton.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. The government is supporting the setting up of a private luxury resort-style quarantine, but has failed to establish a single purpose-built quarantine facility almost 2 years into the pandemic. Why?
The Minister for Health. The Minister for Health has the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker, and I do want to directly
The Minister for Health will just wait one moment. The member for Wills is warned. The minister is entitled to give his. The member for Health is entitled to give his response. Members might want to check Standing Order 65B. The Minister for Health has the call.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker, and I want to directly address the question in relation to quarantine facilities. Firstly, 471,000 Australians have come back on red zone flights. That 471,000 puts into perspective the task that the nation has had in order to keep people safe. In so doing, a series of elements were set up. Firstly, the hotel quarantine was established, and what that has led to is one of the 4 rings of containment to protect Australia in terms of borders, testing, tracing and distancing. That in turn has led to one of the lowest rates of COVID and one of the lowest rates of loss of life in the world. That is the first line of protection. The second thing is we did set up a National Resilience Centre, specifically focused and run by the Commonwealth at Howard Springs. And I will read the advice that I've received and which reflects that which has been put forward, as I understand it, through Jane Holden, the former Secretary of Finance and of Health. Howard Springs maintains the highest standards of infection prevention control practices, and to date there have been no reported instances of transmission between cohorts of international arrivals in quarantine at the centre, and no instance of transmission into the Australian community. The third element that has been set up is the establishment of purpose-built, as opposed to Howard Springs, which already existed and which was adapted and used in a way which has not seen a single case transmitted between cohorts or a single case escape. It is a functioning, highly effective system which has now been taken over by the Northern Territory at their request, as they saw it as their responsibility. In addition to that, though, there is now obviously the facility being developed in Melbourne, as well as facilities in Brisbane and in Perth, which are at different stages of advancement. And so those 3 layers have been established, and that is why, perhaps above all the other elements that we have taken, amongst those rings of containment, that we have had one of the lowest rates of loss of life in the world, one of the 3 lowest rates amongst the 38 OECD countries. That means that we have saved over 30,000 lives by comparison with the OECD average. We've saved over 45,000 lives by comparison with the rates in the United Kingdom and in the United States. So these actions, these 3 steps, quarantine within hotels, the dedicated Howard Springs National Resilience Facility and the establishment of new dedicated facilities are the things which have helped keep Australians safe and will keep us safe going forwards.
The member for Mayo has the call.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Agriculture. South Australian fruit and vegetables, including cherries, berries and apples from my electorate that are destined for export markets, need to be heat-treated interstate before export. This is costly and creates time delays. I've long advocated for the need for an endpoint treatment facility in South Australia to reduce the economic impact of fruit fly and spoilage. Will the Minister please advise when the government will provide support for this much-needed facility in South Australia?
The Minister for Agriculture has the call.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank the member for Mayo for her question and her passionate advocacy on this matter for some time. And the member is correct and quite right in trying to make sure that we address this issue. It is threatening and it potentially does have the potential to threaten much of our exports from South Australia and Australia. So the government is in the final determinations of the appropriateness of a facility to make sure that it fits in within our export protocols with our export partners, making sure that we understand that also we consult widely with industry and also the South Australian government, who have been very passionate as well about the advocacy for such a facility, considering the geographical constraints of South Australian producers from the nearest facility. So we are in that final determination, making sure that any investment that we partner with either the South Australian government or industry itself makes sense and meets those protocols and ensures that we protect the industries in South Australia, and it also complements our national fruit fly program, a $16.9 million program, in fact where we released sterile fruit fly within the electorate of Mayo to try and breed out fruit fly. So we're working consistently with states, and I can assure the member that it will be very soon that those final determinations will be made around that facility.
The member for Boothby has the call.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Treasurer. Will the Treasurer please explain to the House how the Morrison government's decisive economic leadership over the course of the COVID-19 pandemic will assist in a strong economic rebound and a brighter future for Australian families and businesses around the country?
The Treasurer.
Well, thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank the member for Boothby for her question and acknowledge her experience as a journalist and being the first female representative for Boothby since 1903, Mr Speaker. And she has been a strong advocate for lower taxes, and more than 5,000 businesses across her electorate are able to access the expanded instant asset write-off, like Paul Guesty, a local constituent whose business, Guesty Brothers, is a plumbing business that bought a new Bobcat with that expanded instant asset write-off. Now, Mr Speaker, as we approach Christmas, it's only appropriately that we reflect on how far the country has come since March of last year, when business and consumer confidence had their biggest falls on record and Treasury feared that unemployment could reach as high as 15%. And we introduced programs like JobKeeper, which the Reserve Bank Governor said was a remarkable program that supported some 700,000 jobs. And I acknowledge the member for Fenner's comments, who said without JobKeeper we would have been looking at unemployment rates at Great Depression levels. Thankfully, JobKeeper made a real difference, Mr Speaker, and now Australia's economic recovery is stronger than all but two major advanced economies, stronger than Germany, stronger than Italy, stronger than Canada, stronger than the United Kingdom, stronger than Japan. And the unemployment rate today is lower than when we came to government. And since September, we've seen 350,000 jobs come back, and job ads are now 30% higher than going into the pandemic. And we've seen a boost in retail consumption, more than $5 billion, according to the retailers, having been spent in the Black Friday sales. And we saw business investment up by more than 9% through the year. And we've been able to retain our AAA credit rating from the three leading credit rating agencies, one of only 9 countries in the world to do so. And overnight, the OECD upgraded their economic growth forecast for Australia from 3.3 to 4.1%, higher than the OECD average, saying that the Australian economy was recovering rapidly. Mr Speaker, that's the strength of the Australian economy. And today is an opportunity to thank all Australians for the sacrifices and the efforts they have made to see this strong rebound in our economy. With one of the highest vaccination rates in the world, one of the lowest mortality rates in the world, and now one of the strongest economic recoveries in the world, we say thank you to all Australians.
The member for Ballarat has the call.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Can the Prime Minister confirm his model of an anti-corruption commission cannot ever hold public hearings for politicians, will only undertake investigations the government wants, and won't even be able to make findings of corruption?
The Minister representing the Attorney-General.
Well, I do thank the Shadow Minister for her question and the opportunity passed to me by the Prime Minister to respond to it. I would note, of course, that the exposure draft has been in the public domain for many, many months. Many, many months. And we've always been ready to engage with the opposition
Members on my left.
On the details and to answer these kinds of questions. There's 349 pages of legislation. Mr Speaker, 349 pages of legislation, because our Commonwealth Integrity Commission model is
Order.
for a
The
serious—
Minister will just resume his seat for one moment. The interjections on my left are far too high. I will start ejecting members if they continue to loudly interject. Yes, the Manager of Opposition Business.
Just might be easier to do it
order.
straight away. Point of order on direct relevance. The question asks about 3 specific aspects of the model that the government's put forward. I respect that what's happened so far has been a preamble about the model generally, but the question only goes to those 3 aspects and asks whether or not that can be confirmed.
The Minister will return to the dispatch box. The question does ask has 3 subsets within it. They are fairly broad, but I will invite the Minister to return to the question.
Well, thank you very much, Mr Speaker. As we've consistently explained, the government's model for the Commonwealth Integrity Commission will have the same powers as the Royal Commission to investigate criminal corruption in the public sector, but what we've also sought to do is make sure that it appropriately provides procedural fairness to individuals who are under investigation for corrupt conduct, and that there are appropriate safeguards against vexatious, baseless, politically motivated and time-wasting referrals, such as the 9 failed referrals to the Australian Federal Police by the Shadow Attorney-General. The fact is that the Labor Party and the Shadow Attorney-General have form in this area, Mr Speaker, and using these matters for entirely political purposes. We are serious about combating corruption.
The Manager of Opposition on a point of order.
Yeah, understanding Order 91 on your previous ruling where you referred to the fact that there were in fact those 3 areas, the Minister is now referring to none of them.
The Manager of Opposition Business has already used the point of order of relevance once. I know that you are referring to 91, but in my view, you are effectively trying to relitigate relevance twice. Now, I'm happy to hear from you again. I've been listening very carefully to the Minister, and I'm not going to give credence to the second argument about relevance, because the Minister has been talking about the ability to deal with corruption, which was one of the 3, about procedural fairness, which certainly would go to the second part of the question. So I'm just not going to give the Manager for Opposition Business an opportunity to relitigate the relevance issue. I'm happy to hear from you on another point.
I'm not seeking to relitigate it. The understanding Order 91, I can't object to how you previously ruled on the issue of relevance, but I can go exactly with what you said could only be referred to, and point out that he's now departing from that ruling, which is what he is. The list you just went through made no mention of the Labor Party, and what he's talking about now is the Labor Party. That's what he's talking about.
But then that comes back to relevance, doesn't it? The Manager of Opposition Business will resume his seat. The Minister has the call.
Well, Mr Speaker.
Order. Order. Members on my left. Members on my left, please.
Mr Speaker, what I'm talking about is the serious policy considerations which have informed our detailed and well-developed model. We want to engage in this matter seriously, but I think there are good grounds for suspicion that those on the other side are motivated by political considerations. This is, after all, the party of Eddie Obeid, Joe Tripodi, Ian McDonald, Craig Thompson, Adam Somyurek and Sam Dastyari, and they're pontificating about virtue in public office. The Australian people know what you're up to.
The Minister will resume his seat. The Minister has completed his answer. The Manager of Members on my right. Members on my right. Members on my left. I get it's the last day. I understand it's the last day. Manager of Opposition Business.
Mr Speaker, the minister was deliberately defying your ruling. As you called into order, he just kept going. Now, I appreciate that you want the interjections on this side to stop, but if a minister is going to behave in that way, the disorder follows.
The Manager of Opposition Business will resume his seat. The member for Chisholm has the call.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the best Minister for Health and Aged Care. Will the minister please outline to the House how our healthcare heroes have worked tirelessly to protect Australians throughout the COVID-19 pandemic?
The Minister for Health has the call.
Well, thank you very much, Mr Speaker, and I want to thank the best member for Chisholm. And let me say this. She has supported the pharmacists, the GPs, the healthcare heroes that have assisted Australia through this vaccination program, general practices such as Sia Medical Centre in Burwood and Box Hill in her electorate that have helped achieve a 39.4 million number of vaccinations in Australia. And those vaccinations have given Australia one of the highest rate of vaccinations in the world, and they've given us one of the lowest rates of loss of life in the world and one of the strongest economic recoveries in the world. And we owe that to our healthcare heroes, to our doctors and our nurses, our pharmacists who've given over 2.3 million vaccinations. We also owe an enormous debt of gratitude to our pathologists and our pathology collectors. They have delivered over 48 million COVID tests. And so the structures we put in place of borders, testing, tracing, distancing and vaccination have protected Australians. What we see is a nation, when you look at the rest of the world, which has saved 30,000 lives by comparison with the OECD, 45,000 lives by comparison with the agonies suffered in our great friends, the United States and the United Kingdom. And as a result of that, Australians have been safer, Australians have been protected, and there's always more work to do. But it's our healthcare heroes who have been on the front line. Just overnight, there were another 700,000 cases of COVID-19 worldwide. There were over 7,800 lives lost worldwide. These global figures put into comparison that although we have had great challenges in this nation and there has been loss and suffering, and we must acknowledge that, what we have experienced as a nation is vastly different to almost anything else experienced by most of the rest of the world. It is a situation which, had we contemplated it 18 months ago, we would say that we have been blessed by comparison with what the rest of the world has faced. And the people whom I most want to thank and acknowledge
Member for Chifley is warned.
Our doctors and our nurses, our pathologists, our pharmacists, our healthcare assistants, our aged care workers, our aged care nurses, all of our healthcare workers. They've kept Australians safe. We owe them our thanks and we honour them.
The Leader of the Opposition.
I join with the Health Minister in honouring those health workers who've kept us safe, Mr Speaker. And my question is to the Prime Minister. Can he confirm that this fortnight government members and senators have crossed the floor on multiple issues? The chair of the Privileges Committee resigned over a report on the member for Pearce, who also resigned, and the Prime Minister was forced to abandon his voter suppression bill. Hasn't the Morrison-Joyce government lost the ability to govern?
The Prime Minister has a call.
No, Mr Speaker. No is the short answer to that question, Mr Speaker. The coalition government continues to focus on the issues that the Australian people have foremost in the front of their mind, Mr
Member
Speaker.
for Isaacs.
Last Sunday, before we came back into this parliament this week, Mr Speaker, we raised one of the most important issues that Australian families have than at any other time,
and that is the terrible impact that social media is having on the mental health of their families. I hear the interjection "what," Mr Speaker, from those overseas. Over on the other side of the chamber, Mr Speaker. Now, they may not be aware of the severity of this issue, Mr Speaker. That might not be what they are concerned about, but I can assure you the members, Mr Speaker, on the government benches in the coalition government are terribly concerned about this. And while the Labor Party want to focus on the parliamentary games of Canberra and what goes on in the bubble of this place, Mr Speaker, my government, our government, will focus very firmly on what is happening in the homes and the communities all around this country, where they are concerned about their health and their well-being as we come through one of the largest and most significant pandemics in 100 years, Mr Speaker. And over the course of this year, and even just this week, as we reach 20 million Australians having had their first vaccination, one of the highest vaccination rates in the world, one of the strongest economies coming through the pandemic, 350,000 people coming back into jobs, Mr Speaker, one of the lowest fatality rates from COVID in the world, having saved 30,000 lives, 217,000 apprentices in trade training, Mr Speaker, 1 million Australians working in manufacturing, Mr Speaker, schools getting back and open again, Australia opening safely so it can remain safely open. These are the issues. These are the issues our government is focused on. The defence of our nation, Mr Speaker, the signing up to the AUKUS agreement and, Mr Speaker, working with our allies and partners to create a free and open Indo-Pacific with the uncertainty that our world faces, particularly in our own region. And even now, Mr Speaker, we hear from the OECD that they've upgraded the economic forecast for Australia as we go into next year, Mr Speaker. People getting a job, people buying a home, 320,000 Australians getting into home ownership as a result of the policies of our government. Mr Speaker, the Leader of the Labor Party spends a lot of his time focusing on this place. He should focus on what's happening out there in the Australian community.
The member for Sydney. Member for Sydney. Member for Ford has the call.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Home Affairs. Will the Minister please update the House on how the management of Australia's international border has been crucial to our successful outcomes in relation to the pandemic, and further detail how the important work being done every day of Australian Border Force?
The Minister for Home Affairs has the call.
Well, thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank the member for his question. There is absolutely no doubt that the very strong and decisive action that this government took in March of last year to successfully manage our borders has certainly saved lives and has contributed to the health outcomes that we have now that, quite frankly, are the envy of the world. But it has been a challenge to close our borders and still ensure that we received the critical goods that Australia and Australia needs. Now, that includes critical supplies of vaccines and personal protective equipment. It includes products that businesses rely on every single day. And, of course, it includes international mail. It's been an absolute challenge to close our borders but still facilitate travel for those who absolutely had to do so for compassionate reasons or for very important work purposes. And it's been a challenge to put in place the new systems that we have so that we can safely reopen our border for vaccinated Australians, as we did last month. But at every step, the men and women of the Australian Border Force have proved that they are more than capable of meeting the challenges that the pandemic has presented to them. It's certainly been tough, and as a government we're very mindful of the impact that changes to our border settings have had on individuals, on families and, of course, on our businesses. And our Australian Border Force officials have been on the front line of this particular issue and dealing with people who are often in very distressing situations. Now, they've certainly helped grieving people through our airports and our quarantine systems. They've worked with businesses to secure vital supply chains through our ports. They've made record seizures of illicit drugs to help keep our communities safe. And all that time, they've patrolled our oceans to make sure that our borders are secure and to keep our people smugglers out and to make sure that they cannot ply their evil trade during the pandemic and beyond. So on behalf of the Government of Australia, I'm very proud to thank the men and women of the Australian Border Force for the tremendous work that they have done, particularly through this year. So to Commissioner Outram and his team of over 5,000 officers and staff who work every single day to keep Australians safe and to secure our interests, a sincere thank you to you. Our nation is made much stronger by the critical work that you do for us, often in very difficult circumstances. So a very Merry Christmas and a safe Christmas to everyone.
The Deputy Opposition Leader.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Can he confirm that this fortnight the Prime Minister has denied saying electric vehicles would end the weekend, denied paying parents to vaccinate their children, wrongly claimed he texted he was going on holiday to Hawaii, and blamed Labor for his failure to introduce an anti-corruption bill? Why does the Prime Minister have such difficulty with the truth?
Complete imputation.
The Leader of the House.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. Well, it was a barely credible question all the way through, and then at the end he flicked a switch to vaudeville. And, Mr Speaker, it is completely— the last part of that question is completely out of order because it contains a slur. It's only said for the TV cameras, and the Australian public should see through it.
The Manager of Opposition Business.
Yeah, thanks very much, Mr Speaker. The question deals with a series of issues that have been the subject of question time over the last fortnight. The final part of the question that the Leader of the House just referred to, there are specific rules as to how honesty can be tested in this place and words that are not allowed to be used, and the wording of this question is consistent with the precedents that have previously been allowed.
If the Manager of Opposition Business would like to take me to practice for some precedents on those, I'm not minded to allow the last part of the question. I'm going to allow the Prime Minister to answer the question, but the last part is out of order. The Prime Minister has the call.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. What I can confirm is, frankly, the Labor Party is so focused on the trivialities of politics, Mr Speaker, and cheap gotcha, Mr Speaker.
Order.
This is the great accusation that the Labor Party makes against me as Prime Minister.
The Prime Minister
Mr.
will
Speaker.
withdraw. The Prime Minister will resume his seat. I'm going to invite the member on my left that yelled out an unparliamentary remark to withdraw it. I didn't see who it was, but I'm going to— the member for Whitlam seeking the call.
I said the word corruption and I withdraw.
The member for Whitlam— the member for Whitlam— the Prime Minister has the call. No.
Without reservation.
The Leader of the House.
Again, the withdrawal needs to be unconditional. And, Mr Speaker, I mean, this member is a habitual offender, as we know, but he should withdraw unconditionally, or frankly, he should leave the chamber.
The Leader of the House. The member for Whitlam. I interpreted his withdrawal to be without reservation. And his further comment was made out of order, I might add, but to something else, to someone, a remark to someone else's comment. So it wasn't an equivocal withdrawal, at least from what I could hear anyway. The Prime Minister has the call.
Mr Speaker, the opposition, the Labor Party, Mr Speaker, prove day in and day out that they're more interested in the slurs and sledges and trivialities of politics, Mr Speaker, coming in here, Mr Speaker, showboating around, rather than focusing, Mr Speaker, on the issues that are really demanding the attention of the Australian people that our government is focused on. Getting them into jobs,
Treasurer.
keeping them safe, Mr Speaker.
driving our manufacturing industries forward, getting electricity prices down, Mr Speaker, standing up to those who would seek to coerce Australia and threaten the interests of Australians, Mr Speaker. These are the strong things that our government has done, Mr Speaker. These are the strong focus that we have as a government, Speaker. The weakness of the ALP, Mr Speaker, the weakness of the Labor Party and the weakness of their leadership brings them back into the trivialities. Their big problem with me as Prime Minister, Mr Speaker, is apparently I go home for Father's Day, I have a holiday with my family, Mr Speaker, and I go to church on a Sunday. Get over it. A lot of Australians do.
Order. 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 Minister for Health. Leader of the Opposition. The member for Menzies has the call.
Mr Speaker, I ask the Minister for Defence if he would inform the House.
Deputy Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition. Deputy Prime Minister. Deputy Prime Minister. The member for Menzies can restart his question.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. And I ask the Minister for Defence if he would inform the House of the appreciation and gratitude of the Australian people for the service of the men and women of the Australian Defence Force in keeping this country safe.
The Minister for Defence has the call.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. Well, first I acknowledge service of the member for Menzies, one of the most honourable people in this House, and he's served as the Defence Minister and as a Minister for a long time in government, and recognise that. Mr Speaker, I'm sure I speak for everybody in this House, and I'm certain all Australians that at Christmas time it's a time to reflect on what has been a very difficult year for many Australians, both at home and abroad, and that of course includes members of the Australian Defence Force, our agencies and those that perform work in our country's name who will never be known to the Australian public, those that wear uniform and those that don't, who are involved in intelligence collection, they're involved in operations overseas to protect our interests. And in many cases, these are the men and women who have been responsible for stopping terrorist attacks, for keeping us safe, and we do pay them a huge honour, Mr Speaker, as a country, by stopping and saying thank you to them for their service and saying thank you for the sacrifice that they will make again this Christmas. Many of them will be deployed overseas or on Operation COVID Assist or elsewhere in our country's name, and we should rightly be incredibly proud of the work that they do, Mr Speaker. As we know, over the last 12 months, they've not just been involved, or over this year, not just been involved in the pandemic, but also 250 ADF personnel risked their lives in the Kabul evacuation, bringing 4,100 people, predominantly women and children, to safety. And that was a remarkable effort. The Prime Minister and I, other members of the National Security Committee, had the briefings right through that period from the CDF and others, and it was a precarious position. As we know, American soldiers lost their lives in that theatre, and ours were able to be brought home safely, and they brought people in such significant number is a great credit to their professionalism. But it doesn't stop there, Mr Speaker. We know that there have been 522 personnel who have been deployed on classified operations abroad. 24,000 troops and 440 Defence Department staff have helped underpin the government's pandemic response through Operation COVID Assist, and all of those who have supported the personnel I've just spoken about, the spouses, the friends, the mates, the children who have gone without contact over an extended period of time with their mum or dad as they've served in these different roles, need to be acknowledged in this place, Mr Speaker, as we approach Christmas. So on behalf of a very grateful nation, a very grateful government, we say thank you to all of those men and women of the Australian Defence Force in the department and those who have provided support in keeping our country safe. May we always provide support, the requisite support to them to keep them safe in the work that they do to keep us safe.
The Leader of the Opposition on indulgence.
Thanks very much, Mr Speaker. I join with the Minister in that very warm tribute to the men and women of the Australian Defence Force. At this time, at Christmas, particularly, the sacrifice will be felt. Those serving us overseas with their families, the long absences, they do us proud, and we hope that each and every one of them stay safe over Christmas, and we express our gratefulness on behalf of the Labor Party. We join with the government.
The member for Corangamite has the call.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister said he would deliver higher real wages, but petrol prices have gone up as much as $900 in a year, while real wages have fallen by $700. Will the Prime Minister finally acknowledge how hard it is for working families to make ends meet under his decade-old government?
The Prime Minister has the call.
Well, thank you, Mr Speaker. And the member raises questions around the cost of living. Mr Speaker, in the 3 years since I was elected Prime Minister, Mr Speaker, inflation has grown by 1.8%. That compares in the last 3 years of the Labor government of 2.5%. Mr Speaker, electricity prices have fallen on average each year by 3.2%, and under Labor in their last 3 years they increased each year by 12.2%, and over the course of their government electricity prices doubled, Mr Speaker, because of their mismanagement. Mr Speaker, clothing and footwear costs over the course of the last 3 years have fallen by 1% on average each year, and that increased to compared to a 0.4% increase, Mr Speaker, under the Labor Party in their last 3 years. Fuel prices, Mr Speaker, over the last 3 years have increased by 1.2% a year over the last 3 years, and under the Labor Party in their last 3 years they increased by 7.2%. Mr Speaker, each and every year of those last 3 years on communications costs, Mr Speaker, under our government since I was elected 3 years ago, Mr Speaker, they have fallen 2.8% each and every year on average, and under the Labor Party they went up by 1.2% over their last 3 years. Mr Speaker, housing costs. As we know, 320,000 Australians helped into home ownership because of the policies of our government. But not only that, housing costs over the last 3 years since I was elected, Mr Speaker, Prime Minister, up 0.6% on average each year. Under the Labor Party in their last 3 years, they went up by 4.3% each and every year, Mr Speaker.
For Kingsford Smith will leave under 94A.
Some 7 times higher than what has occurred under our government. And health costs, Mr Speaker, they've gone up 3% per year each year on average over the last 3 years. Under the Labor Party, they went up, Mr Speaker, 5% each year and every year. What the Australian people know, Mr Speaker, that regardless of the challenges that we face as a country for our economy, and what it means for cost of living, and what it means what they can earn, they can know 2 things. One, our strong economic management will always ensure, Mr Speaker, that Australians will be better off than they would under the Labor Party, Mr Speaker, and they'll be able to keep more of what they earn, because we believe that Australians and Australian business owners should keep more of what they earn, because, Mr Speaker, if they give it to the Labor Party, they know they'll only waste it.
The member for Parkes has the call.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Agriculture and Northern Australia. Will the minister update the House on the support made available by the Morrison-Joyce government to assist Australians affected by natural disasters throughout the year?
The Minister for Agriculture and Northern Australia has the call.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank the member for Parkes for his question. And he knows full well, particularly over the last couple of weeks, his electorate of Parkes and also the electorate of Riverina have faced up to a flooding event. And in fact, that's extended even into my own electorate, where we've had the evacuation of Inglewood and Yallarbin. And I thank the local government for the key role that they played, not just in this flooding event, but through all the natural disasters that we faced up to over the last 12 months, whether it be flood, whether it be fire, the drought, or even cyclones. And it is that coordinated approach that we work with state and local governments to ensure that our response is immediate, timely and effective. And they are long-lasting and long-standing arrangements that we continue to enhance at every chance. And at first chance, it is about It is about that immediacy of support, taking away that financial burden. And we partner with the states in making sure we give those people some dignity and respect through our disaster recovery allowance. We 50-50 pay for that, around making sure that in some states it's $900 and some is over $1,600, and in others it's the full reimbursement of out-of-pocket costs. And the federal government complements and supplements that with our disaster recovery payment, $1,000 per adult, $400 per child. And that makes a real difference in taking away that burden, that mental strain of the immediacy, of the urgency of what they have faced up to. But then we work with the states further, making sure that we share the burden in rebuilding the public infrastructure, making sure that we also use this thing called common sense, and where we can, we not just rebuild it to the standard, but where we can, we build it to a higher standard to make it more resilient for future disasters in the future. That's what we should continue to strive to, and I thank the states for working collaboratively with us on that. We also make sure that we are tailoring our response with states in the immediacy, not just in short-term but long-term support. And that's also through, whether it be through drought, through regional investment corporation loans, interest-free, repayment-free, whether that be through restocking, replanting grants, or whether it be through small business grants or small business loans, making sure it's tailored to the local community. It's a local solution, not a Canberra solution. And it's important that we understand that the Australian taxpayer has made a significant investment, with $11 billion towards drought, over $2 billion to the Black Summer event, and $3 billion to the floods in north-west Queensland alone, and that continues, and that has bipartisan support in making sure we help Australians in their hour of need. But one of the most significant investments out of all those programs that we make is in our people, in those people, nearly $130 million in mental health support, in helping the healing of those that have faced up to the tragedy of loss in some cases. But above all, the last line of defence are those emergency service personnel. And sadly, we have seen some that have made the ultimate sacrifice for their country and their community. So to all those emergency service personnel that do their bit for their country and community, at this end of the year, we say thank you.
The member for Maribyrnong has the call.
My question is to the Prime Minister. This is Nick from Mackay.
Order.
He was born with multiple
Order.
complex disabilities.
The member for
requiring
Maribyrnong will just
24.
put the prop down. Member for Maribyrnong has the call.
Thank you.
No, put the prop down. No,
I beg your pardon?
The member for Maribyrnong will not use any props. Put it down.
Nick is not a
member
prop.
For
He's the face of the cuts of the Morrison government. Nick from
the member for Maribyrnong is warned.
Nick from Mackay was born with multiple complex disabilities requiring 24/7 high-level support for all areas of his daily life. When the Morrison government cut Nick's plan by $300,000, Nick's family, Tammy and Rob, described the NDIS behaviour as emotionally exhausting, horrendous and has left Nick unsafe. How many individual NDIS participants have had their funding cut in the past year?
The Prime Minister has a call.
Speaker, the member who asked the question would know of my deep interest and concern in those Australians who suffer from multiple sclerosis. You'll be aware that my brother-in-law has suffered with that condition for many years. And Mr Speaker, I will look forward to receiving the details of what the member has raised in relation to his question today. But, Mr Speaker, as the member will know, when he raised similar matters regarding other cases yesterday, that I, Mr Speaker, and the minister responsible have gone back to him on each of those cases. And as it turns out, Mr Speaker, the matters that were raised by the member yesterday, when we were able to go back to him in the case of Harper's case, Mr Speaker, we were advised that Harper's current plan was in place for 6 months and includes a higher rate of funding than his previous 12-month plan, Mr Speaker. Now, I wrote, Mr Speaker, to the member advising of this, so I look forward to...
The member for Maribyrnong on a point of order. The member for
Point of order. The Prime Minister is misleading the House. I've spoken
order.
To Harper's mother
member
since the Prime Minister wrote to me, and she doesn't agree with him.
Will resume his seat. The Leader of the House.
Well, Mr Speaker, there is no point of order. It's a complete grandstand.
The Leader of the House. There is That was not a point of order that was in order. The member for Maribyrnong. The Prime Minister will return to the question.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. As I wrote promptly back to the member to follow up the very issue he raised in this place yesterday, Mr Speaker, I can tell I'm advised that the National Disability Insurance Agency is in frequent contact with Harper's parents, and it is incorrect to say Harper's current NDIS funding has been reduced, including overnight supports. I'm advised that Harper's current plan is in place for 6 months and includes a higher rate of funding than his previous 12-month plan. Mr Speaker, it is important to consider comparable annualised plans' values and durations. NDIS plans are frequently implemented for a shorter period, such as 6 months, for participants with complex needs like Harper's. It is also important to recognise that the NDIS works with mainstream service systems, including the health system, to support families with additional support needs for health conditions. Mr Speaker, I would have thought that the member for Maribyrnong may be interested in the very important issue that was raised in relation to Harper's needs, Mr Speaker. But if he's going to use people, Mr Speaker, to make political points, that's a separate issue, and I'll let others make the judgment. We took his complaint seriously. We followed it up, Mr Speaker. We got back to him, Mr Speaker, and I've concluded my answer.
If a member asks a question, I would have thought that the member would be wanting to hear what the answer is. The member for Berowra has the call.
Mr Speaker, my question is to the Minister for Employment, Workforce, Skills, Small and Family Business, representing the Minister for the NDIS and Minister for Government Services. Will the Minister update the House on the Morrison government's rollout of the NDIS and its growing workforce? Why is it so important we recognise our disability sector workers and the incredible work they do, particularly throughout the COVID-19 pandemic?
The Minister for Employment, Workforce, Skills, Small and Family Business.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. Can I thank the member for Berowra for his question, acknowledge his enormous interest in this area and his advocacy for those with disability, especially with mental disability and challenges, and his lifelong work in this area that we can all be so very proud of. Likewise, Mr Speaker, the entire House can be proud of what we're all trying to do with the NDIS. It is a world-leading endeavour. It started above politics, and I know we're all committed to keeping it above that. And it's been a great privilege for many of us in this House to work on its rollout. Today, the NDIS supports more than 480,000 extraordinary Australians who are seeking to achieve their goals, their dreams and their aspirations. In 2013, we put the first participant into the scheme, and today, 8 years later, we are approaching the milestone of 500,000 Australians. Prior to the NDIS, of course, support for those Australians with disability was fragmented across the Commonwealth, states and territories. Around $7 billion was spent if you roll it all up annually. Yet today, in the July to September period this year alone, only 3 months, just 3 months in duration, the NDIS made payments of $6.4 billion to participants. That's a 350% increase in just 8 years, which goes to the extraordinary commitment of governments towards the scheme. In June 2014, just 1 year into the NDIS, there were 1,350 providers. Today, there's over 17,800. We should be proud of what we're achieving. Now, tomorrow, as we all know, is the International Day of People with Disability. The House won't be sitting, so it's incumbent that we use this day in this House to recognise Australians with disability and seek collectively to celebrate what they've achieved. And I think it's important we take the opportunity to highlight the incredible work that the providers, carers and family members and those working in the disability sector do. They make a world of difference in the lives of extraordinary Australians. So can I simply say thank you to all those working in the area, because it's the work that those beautiful Australians do to care for Australians with disability that allows those Australians to reach for the sky. A great example, a member for Lindsay's electorate, is the blind chef of Penrith. Craig's an incredible man, beating childhood cancer. He went on to pursue a skilled career, becoming a fully qualified chef, and, of course, working in some of Sydney's great establishments. Supported by the NDIS, he pursued his dream of opening his own joint, the Blind Chef Cafe and Dessert Bar in Penrith's High Street. He employs Australians of all ability in his cafe, and the cafe is designed for accessibility for all Australians. It's because of great workers of the NDIS that the Blind Chef can continue to work today, and thank you to all of them.
The minister's time has expired. The member for Maribyrnong has the call. Member for Maribyrnong.
My question's to the Prime Minister. Liam McGarrigle is an autistic young man. He and his family won a landmark case in 2017 over NDIS transport funding that had implications for thousands of other people who rely upon the NDIS for support. But in November, the Morrison government cut Liam's plan by $38,000, including his transport funding, bringing the family to tears. Prime Minister, how many individual participants like Liam have had their NDIS funding cut in the last 12 months?
The minister has the call.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. Can I thank the member for Maribyrnong for his question? The minister is well aware of the concerns raised by Mrs McGarrigle in relation to the transport funding for her son Liam. The minister also received direct communication from Mrs McGarrigle a number of weekends ago, and it will be responding to the concerns that have been raised. On receipt of the concerns raised, the agency made contact with the family. I understand they have acknowledged the error that has been made in relation to the transport funding. The NDIA has apologised for that error, and the issue is being resolved through that process.
The member for Maribyrnong on a point of order. You're finished. The minister has completed his answer. The member for Robertson.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. And my question is to the Minister for the Environment, representing the Minister for Women. Will the minister update the House on the strength and resilience of Australians during a very challenging 2 years, particularly Australian women and their incredible contribution?
The Minister for the Environment, representing the Minister for Women, has the call.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. Can I thank the member for Robertson for her question and commend her on the important role that she will play chairing a committee that examines how we can best protect women often, but all Australians, from anonymous online abuse. For so many women, this has been the most difficult of years. For women in this workplace, it has been a year like no other. In this building, where we should aim to demonstrate global leadership in parliamentary workplaces, Kate Jenkins' sobering report told us that we must do better. I want to thank the 1,700 women and men who came forward to tell their stories, hurtful and distressing though that was. I want to say that I feel that the culture of change is coming, and we can look forward with more confidence, where a young person who comes to work in this building feels inspired and valued, like so many do, Mr Speaker. But all over Australia, whether it be getting through the bushfires and drought, storms that damaged the crop that was finally going to balance the farm books, navigating lockdowns and the pandemic, the economic challenges that we've faced, the one constant has been the courage and resilience shown by women across the country. With policies reflecting our principles, respect, dignity, choice, equality of opportunity and justice, the Morrison government has handed down a dedicated, record-spending women's budget to improve women's safety, economic security, health and well-being. From listing life-saving women's medicines on the PBS, because we know that you can't place a value on time with your family, to funding early education and care, to superannuation that allows greater savings for retirement. The Morrison government will continue to support women at every age and stage of their life. For the women who run rural businesses and households, who fill our high streets with activity and shop fronts, who volunteer their time for local sporting teams and on school committees, who juggle, as so many women do, work, home and the family's happiness. Thank you for everything you do to create strong communities. And I want to particularly thank every frontline worker doing the heartbreaking and life-saving work, keeping women and children housed, supporting their path to justice and financial freedom. We cannot keep women, children and their families safe without you. And I know I'm joined by every member of this place in saying thank you for your skill, your pride and your warmth. To the women of this country who are leading the way, you deserve our respect. We thank you for your contributions to every facet of our culture and communities. So often we see you've been hit hard by life circumstances, you draw on inner resilience, you get back up, you dust yourself off and you face that uncertain future with confidence. The Parliament is with you.
The Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I ask that further questions be placed on the notice paper.
The Leader of the Opposition.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. I seek leave to give a personal explanation.
Does the Leader of the Opposition claim to be misrepresented?
I do, Mr Speaker.
The Leader of the Opposition has the call.
By the member for Latrobe, the Assistant Minister for Customs, Safety and Multicultural Affairs, in social media posts on the 29th of November and the 30th of November. And it concerns Barbecue Gate, Mr Speaker. The member for Latrobe has joined the conspiracy theorists that a barbecue cooked for me by the Premier of Victoria on Saturday was a fake. I can confirm, Mr Speaker, just like the moon landing, it was real. The steaks were cooked perfectly medium rare. The steaks were cooked, but not as cooked as the member for Latrobe.
The member for Maribyrnong seeking the call. The member for Maribyrnong has the call.
Yes. I seek leave to clarify misrepresentation by the Prime Minister in question time.
Well, is the
he's misrepresented my position.
I'm sorry. Is the member for Maribyrnong wishing to make a personal explanation?
Yeah, I'm seeking to make a personal explanation.
Does the member for Maribyrnong claim to be misrepresented?
By the Prime Minister in question time.
The member for Maribyrnong has the call.
Prime Minister today answered a question which I raised yesterday about Harper Murnane. And the Prime Minister said that he had written to me just before question time, which he had, and he said that the person we asked about yesterday's plan hadn't been cut compared to the previous year. Upon receipt of the letter from the Prime Minister before question time, I reached out to the mother, surely the mother of the person counts here, and she says, the Prime Minister said that we were using this person for political purposes.
We'll just pause for one moment. You're claiming to be misrepresented. How is this a personal—
The Prime Minister said that we were seeking to use the story of Harper's Cuts for political purposes, and that is not the case. The mother—
Members on my right.
Just hear us. A couple of sentences won't kill you. The mother has written to me at 2 o'clock. This is about the mother of the person you claim to care about.
Member for Maribyrnong.
The mother has written to me, and to clarify because I sent her the Prime Minister's letter, and the mother has said that in the time that the cuts occurred to her son, he's now legally blind, he's lost his ability to talk.
The Leader of the House on a point of order.
A point of order, Mr Speaker. This is a very sensitive—
Leader of the House would just wait one moment. I can't hear the Leader of the House when I'm getting all this interjection on my left. The Leader of the House has the call.
Mr Speaker, we're all in agreement that this is a very difficult circumstance, and if there are details that the honourable member wishes to bring to the attention of the minister, then the minister has, I'm sure, every capability and every desire to resolve the issue, and that's where it should be undertaken, Mr Speaker. This is not a, in terms of the words that have just been used, that is not a representation in relation to being misrepresented in this place. It was adding somehow to a question that was put earlier. And, Mr Speaker, I don't think it's in order.
The Leader of the House can resume his seat. I'll uphold the point of order. And we will now go to papers. Order. The Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. Documents are tabled in accordance with the list circulated to honourable members earlier today. Full details of the documents will be recorded in the votes and proceedings.
The Leader of the House.
Mr Speaker, I move that leave of absence be given to every member of the House of Representatives from the determination of this sitting of the House to the date of the next sitting.
The Minister for...
that is to be put.
Yes, thank you. The question is that the motion be agreed to. All of those that opinion say aye. The contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The Minister...
Thank you very much.
Well, just one moment, please.
One more.
You'll get there. You'll get there. Yeah. For the information of honourable members, I present a schedule of the status of government responses to committee reports as at 1 December 2021. The schedule will be incorporated in Hansard. I also present the Commonwealth Ombudsman's quarterly report under the section 712 capital F 6 subsection 6 of the Fair Work Act 2009 for the period 1 April to 30 June 2021. The Minister for Health has the call.
On indulgence, Mr Speaker, and I hope not to detain the House for too long. Well, Mr Speaker, it's been a slightly busy term, and when I think back to the fear and the concern of this House and this country in February and March of last year, and I look at that which has occurred around the world and the lives that have been saved here by comparison, I'm so proud of this government, of this parliament and this nation and all the things that have been done to save lives and protect lives. And I'm confident that the systems that are in place of the Chief Medical Officer and the Department of Health, the National Security Committee, the National Incident Centre and the National Cabinet, and then the leadership of the Prime Minister and the Treasurer to provide the guiding way, that the country is well prepared for the future. And there will be challenges, but we are well prepared for that future, and to have in some small way stood beside them at the time that they have made the biggest of decisions and to have hopefully helped has been an immense privilege. But for all the time that we've spent together, and as fond as I am of the Prime Minister and the Treasurer, my heart is ultimately elsewhere. Sorry, Josh. It's my family and my amazing wife, Paula, who is in the gallery today. Nurse, carer, counsellor, confidant, but perhaps above all else, she's raised two beautiful children largely as a single mother. And I am so immensely proud of Poppy, who is going into Year 11, and James, who is about to go into senior school. They're both getting awards this week, and again, I'm not there. But they said to me on Sunday, they looked at me and said, "Dad, this is your last chance to be a proper dad. And it's time to come home, Dad." And so, Mr Speaker, earlier today I spoke with the Prime Minister and my electorate chairman, and I informed them that I would not be contesting the next election. This may come as a surprise to some of you. For the reason that the very ideas and structures that brought me into this place are still the things which I love and believe in. The great Liberal Party, from Menzies' Forgotten People, to Howard's Battlers, to Scott Morrison's Quiet Australians, the golden thread which has run through the life of this party has been the simple belief that it's our task to try to give every Australian the best chance at the life of their choice. And I would never be here but for the gift of the party. And I want to thank my electorate chair, Peter Rawlings, the extraordinary Peter Rawlings, and his predecessor, Julie Heron, and all of our party members, Charles and Marshall, who've been in the same roles for 20 years. But I'm very confident in the future of our local party. I think it is time, Mr Deputy Speaker, subject to the will of the local branch members for a strong, brilliant woman to be the Liberal candidate for Flinders. And I'm very confident about the future of this great party in this coalition. I look at the incredible talent on the back bench, the middle bench and the front bench, and I know that in the leadership of the Prime Minister we see someone that the bigger the issue, the clearer he knows the way. That's it. And I think that's because he understands Australians and he trusts Australians. As much as I love the Liberal Party, I love this place more. My father said of the Parliament, honour the Parliament, be a parliamentarian before a politician. And this week I have seen this Parliament at its absolute highest with the passage of May's Law, government and opposition and crossbench working together for both the yes and the no case, and then the yes and the no case working together for the dignity of the Parliament. And that reminds me of a second rule which I've learnt along the way, and that is always turn your back from the cameras when you're putting your mask on. My staff taught me that. A little late, but none of us would be anything without our staff. And I want to thank the incredible staff, from all of us to all of us, but particularly from me to my staff. They have kept Australia safe and they have worked throughout night and day during the course of this pandemic and throughout the last 20 years. And I can't name all of them, but I do want to note that there are 6 who have served for a decade. Lynn Strawn and Sarah Meredith, Tina McGuffey and Denise Garnock, Lisa Burgess and the incredible Wendy Black, who's been Chief of Staff for a decade. But there's a 7th, and I want to acknowledge Joanne Tester as well, who, along with Wendy, has been the unrelenting and extraordinary Joint Chief of Staff during the course of this term. You get double points for a pandemic, Joe. But then there's one more thing. The highest of all honours is the simplest. We are all representatives, and I have been graced and favoured by the people of Flinders to represent the area in which I grew up, and the Mornington Peninsula and Western Port. And our strongest role is when we are partners with our community. Gunnamatta Beach, Point Nepean, the Somerville Secondary College, Balcombe Grammar, the Mornington Cancer Centre and the Abacus Autism Centre in Hastings. All of these things are meaningful and real. But my most cherished possession, Mr Speaker, is a simple letter. I received a letter some years ago from Olivia. Olivia is the mum of Bella, who at the time was 5. And they are a family from a dairy and potato farm at Coralyn, just outside of Cooey Rup. And Olivia said to me that Bella had an ultra-rare genetic enzyme condition which led to liver fibrosis, and that it was a terminal condition without treatment. It's so rare there may at any one time be one child in Australia. There was no medicine in Australia and there was never going to be one that was listed. But at her request, we asked the company to provide compassionate access from overseas, and thankfully they gave us the grace and did that. And it's the letter on her 6th birthday, which I keep behind my desk, which I wish to read briefly. Isabella celebrated her 6th birthday at the start of August, and I thought this was a great opportunity to thank you and update you on her progress. We are overwhelmed with her response to the Cananuma infusion she started 2 months ago. She's a changed little girl. Most notable for us is that she is no longer in constant pain. She started to build muscle. She has bounds of new energy, spends most of her free time playing on the gym rings outside. We hope to enrol her in gymnastics class soon. Well, she's just turned 9. They did enrol her in gymnastics, and in soccer, and in cross-country. And if there'd been nothing else in these last 20 years, that alone would have been enough. But now, Mr Speaker, it's time to turn to focus on another family. Paula, Poppy, James Elsa and Charlie the Cavoodle. And there's a lot more to do over the next 6 months. To paraphrase my favourite film, The Princess Bride, we've all got our secrets. There's a country to protect, medicines to list, a budget to prepare, and an election to win. But when all of that is done, it will be time to come home. I honour the House.
The Prime Minister on indulgence.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. We all answer to higher authorities in this place, and Paula, Poppy and James are the higher authority to whom the Minister for Health answers. Mr Speaker, I could not be more grateful to the Minister for Health, but more significantly to Paula, Poppy and James, for allowing Greg to be here and serve in this place and serve as part of our team here, particularly over these last 3 years. I seek the indulgence of the House to refer to the member by his first name. When Greg spoke to Josh and I before the last election and expressed to us his desire to go and be with his family, we called upon him one last time, not knowing in full what those 3 years might bring. And over the course of these, particularly last 2 years, I have relied on no one more than Greg and Josh as we have sought together with the Deputy Prime Minister and his predecessor to navigate our way through this very difficult time. I could have thought to have no more brilliant mind, no greater friend, no person of greater integrity, but most importantly, someone with a massive heart. I remember when, after the 2016 election, and there was a discussion about who would be the next health minister, and when I was asked about this, I said there's only one choice, and that is Greg Hunt. Because it is one of the hardest, and those who have been health ministers, there's a few in this chamber, it is one of the hardest portfolios to deal with. There are many stakeholders, all with the most worthy of cases and the most urgent of needs, and it is so difficult to prioritise those. And it is always the biggest of asks at the Expenditure Review Committee, and it is always the most difficult of moral challenges to seek to weigh those up. And so you want a health minister who has a big brain and a big heart. And I have had the great fortune to have a person who is excelled in those attributes more than most, if not any, I've known in this place. His achievements we'll speak of at other times, and I know he doesn't want me to go on too much today. But he'll today he'll expect them to be listed, I'm sure, at great length. But, Mr Speaker, that won't be a difficult task because they are many. Whether Greg and I, over a long time, shared offices next to each other in opposition, he has helped me as a dear friend deal with some of the most difficult of challenges and issues, and he's encouraged me. And one of the nicest things he'd often say after a very long conversation on whatever the topic might be on a weekend or whenever it was, he said, "Now, Mark, just go and be a dad for the rest of the day." And I would always seek to take that advice. And so, as we come to this point, I am obviously very sad to lose an incredibly great member of my team, but I'm sure I join with the Treasurer in saying we're both going to miss a very, very good mate, and his constant encouragement
to us both at a personal level as well as a professional level. Your father, mate, he would be so proud. He would be so proud. As Paula, I'm sure, is bursting with pride in you, and our loss is their great gain, and I know how much you're looking forward to that. How much you're looking forward to that. I pray it will be a great time of blessing on you and your family, and I look forward to our friendship in the many, many years to come outside of this place. And on behalf of the government, on behalf of the party I have the great privilege to lead, thank you for honouring this place. Thank you for honouring our party. Thank you for honouring your family. And thank you for honouring yourself in the way you've conducted yourself. Thank you, mate.
The Leader of the Opposition on indulgence.
Thanks very much, Mr Speaker. On behalf of the Australian Labor Party, we wish Greg Hunt well in his personal life, and we wish thank Paula and Poppy and James, conscripts, as our families all are, to service. 2 decades in parliamentary life is a significant achievement, and being a senior minister in a range of portfolios is something that you can be very proud of indeed. In particular, though, being health minister during a global pandemic would have brought enormous challenges, not the least of which would have been the time you spent away from your family. I know being locked out of Sydney for 3 months was difficult. You were locked out for a lot longer than that and had to keep on top of the details. Can I say that in terms of any time that I've requested information from you, it has been forthcoming, and you have been very professional, and I thank you for that. You get to spend time now in your beautiful electorate. I actually went down there and campaigned in that first election that you ran on, and it is a beautiful part of Victoria and a beautiful part of Australia. You can be proud of your efforts. You've been loyal to the Liberal Party. I'm used to saying the other. You've been a very loyal Liberal Party member, and that's an honourable thing, to stand by your beliefs, and it is indeed something that you can be proud of. You're a worthy opponent as someone who has different values, but understands as well that from your perspective you have stayed true to them, and I congratulate you on that. I think that I'm sure you will have a future contribution to make in your working life, but of course it's your personal life that will be much improved by moving on. So all the best, Greg. On behalf of everyone on my team, on behalf of the Australian Labor Party, I note that you have given yourself, it's a class act I reckon, standing up in the Parliament, giving respect to this place, which is what you've done as someone who is a parliamentarian, and I thank you for that, and I thank you on behalf of all who've benefited from your service for your 20 years in public life.
I don't intend to detain the House for too much longer, but I do want to make just a quick remark, and that is, as someone who has walked this walk for some time, I want to thank the Minister for Health, because you have saved lives in Australia, particularly in relation to those suffering from mental health, and in particular those suffering from eating disorders. There are tens of thousands of Australians out there whose lives have been changed because of your actions, and I'm sure they will always think very, very fondly of you. Thank you. The Prime Minister.
Well, thank you, Mr Speaker. It is that time of the year where as we close the parliamentary proceedings for this year and before returning next year, that it is customary for us to express our thanks to all of those who have supported us in our work over the course of this year. It has been an extraordinary year. I hope we never see another one like it, Mr Speaker. It has been an extraordinary year, but when Australians are challenged in great ways, Australians always rise to the challenge. And we said at the start of this pandemic that we've always considered ourselves to be a strong people, and we're about to find out how strong we were. And indeed, Australians have been proven incredibly strong and resilient and caring and compassionate as they've sought to navigate their own way through, with great support from government, to ensure that they can be where we are today, in a situation where all around the world Australia's record of coming through this pandemic has been incredibly strong. There is no country anywhere in the world that can claim a perfect record in dealing with a 1 in 100-year pandemic, Mr Speaker. But when it comes to Australia's performance, and more significantly the performance of Australians, it has been extraordinary. One of the lowest fatality rates in the world. There are 30,000 more Australians here in this country at the moment who wouldn't have otherwise been here were it not for the fact that our response has ensured that more Australians have been able to survive this terrible pandemic, which in so many other countries that has not been the case, and that our economy, and as we move into next year, we're in a position where the economy is strengthening once again. As the lockdowns are in the rear vision mirror and the economic impacts of those are in the rear vision mirror, and we look through that front windscreen together as a country, and we move into 2022 with confidence, Mr Speaker. We're a confident people. We're an optimistic people. We always look to see the opportunity, and we always back ourselves in as a confident nation, confident in our abilities and each other to achieve what we know we can achieve. It has been a year not only tested by the pandemic, but it has been a year where the situation globally, Mr Speaker, has been extraordinarily challenging and will continue to do so. It is a time, as I've reflected, as have other ministers, in particular the Minister for Defence, in highlighting that we have not seen such a time in the Indo-Pacific since the 1930s, Mr Speaker, and that has required significant responses from the government. And I want to thank the allies and partners with whom we work with in the Indo-Pacific, our great comprehensive strategic partners in ASEAN. They are our great friends, our neighbours with whom we share this region. And it was an honour this year that Australia was able to achieve the first ever comprehensive strategic partnership with ASEAN, Mr Speaker. It speaks to Australia's place in the Indo-Pacific region as a trusted partner, as a trusted neighbour. And even now throughout the Pacific, Mr Speaker, and we think of our Pacific family, and we think of all those in the Solomon Islands especially, and we think of those AFP and ADF officers and DFAT officers who are up there right now seeking to secure the peace and stability and calm of one of our Pacific family of nations, as our responsibility is to them in our own region. I want to thank all of those and their families who are on service right now in the Solomon Islands for what they're doing for our Pacific family, and indeed expressing the values of our nation and our care and concern for our Pacific family. The conclusion of AUKUS, Mr Speaker, has been a milestone event in Australia's national security. We enjoy an extraordinary relationship with the United States. We enjoy an extraordinary relationship, Mr Speaker, with the United Kingdom. And we continue to work together with them and all of our like-minded partners, because we cannot assume in this world that an international order that favours freedom, Mr Speaker, will always endure. And that is why we together, here in Australia, Australians all, Mr Speaker, one and free, standing up for the important issues of liberal democracy in our part of the world. Because, Mr Speaker, if we don't, who will? If we don't, who will? And we have, and we will continue to do that. I speak of our partners and allies in the United States and in the United Kingdom, and of course we work so closely with them, as the Minister for Defence mentioned, in what was the largest single air evacuation by Australia in Afghanistan, with 4,100 people lifted out of that awful, awful situation, Mr Speaker. And they are now, so many of them, who have not gone to other countries, Mr Speaker, they're here in Australia and becoming Australians. And in those days of extreme pressure, Mr Speaker, I'm truly grateful to the extraordinary work and support that was done in the Department of Home Affairs, in the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, in the Australian Defence Force. And I was so privileged to be able to, when I went through AMAB on the way back from overseas just a few months ago, Mr Speaker, to go there
and to say thank you to all of those who were serving during that time, and to see the pictures that were drawn by the young children who had been evacuated to freedom, Mr Speaker. It was truly moving. They were indeed truly grateful to Australia. And now those children are here in Australia, going to Australian schools and growing up Australian, Mr Speaker. And that says a lot about us. After 20 years in Afghanistan, after 20 years, there are disappointments. But at the same time, what our forces did in Afghanistan, and the 41 Australians in particular who are lost there, Mr Speaker, we think of them at this time and their families and the service that they put in place and all of those who went with them. And this year they won't be there, but for many, the memories of their time in Afghanistan will stay with them forever, and for many it will haunt them, Mr Speaker, the veterans. And for all those veterans who are thinking of that time, and indeed those who continue to serve, it is our duty in this place to reach out to them and to continue to support them in every which way we possibly can, and thanking them, Mr Speaker, for their service. Mr Speaker, it's been a year where we have dealt with many other challenges. The challenges of how we address the future energy economy, how we deal with the online world and how we make that safer for Australians, strengthening the opportunities in regional Australia, and I think it has been a strong year for regional Australia. I'm sure the Deputy Prime Minister would agree, Mr Speaker, but it's a constant reminder that where once drought and bushfires have impacted regional Australia, even as we stand here today, floods and the ruination of crops, which were the next payment for those coming out of those earlier challenges, Mr Speaker, and then hope disappointed once again. But regional Australians are a resilient people. Rural Australians are a resilient people. They are the heart of Australia, Mr Speaker, and I want to thank all of them for their endurance and their resilience and their care and compassion for one another. The disaster resilience, response and recovery capabilities have been enhanced. The response to the Aged Care Royal Commission and addressing the very serious needs there, continuing on the record financial support for those in this country who, through no fault of their own, have grown up with disabilities that in decades past have meant that they could not even hope to have the same opportunities of other Australians, and the National Disability Insurance Scheme, Mr Speaker, seeks to put that right and to give them as much opportunity as we possibly can, to enable them. Supporting the mental health of Australians, again I thank the Minister for Health, but I also thank Pat McGorry, who has been a constant source of advice and counsel to me and the Minister for Health and many here. I want to thank my colleagues for their same encouragement and support on those issues. Addressing the safety of women here in this building has been an important issue, and I want to thank all the staff, all of our staff, Mr Speaker, who work here with us, and it is our commitment to ensure we will work together to secure a safer workplace for them. I look to the Minister for Indigenous Australians, and I am reminded of the great true heart of this country, Mr Speaker, and I want to thank again those Indigenous leaders and elders and Indigenous Australians around the country who keep their culture alive, the oldest living culture in the world, Mr Speaker. It is something this country can be truly, truly proud of and truly grateful for. May we continue to seek to understand their insights, Mr Speaker, as we seek to take this country forward. Mr Speaker, they are extraordinary times. They are not times for confusion. They are a time for clarity, which we are seeking to provide. Mr Speaker, decent, hard-working Australians, generous and fair, they love their country, they wish to simply move forward, and we want to move forward with them into 2022. I'm very proud, Mr Speaker, of the members of this House, particularly in the most recent debate the Minister for Health has spoken of on Maves Law. It is always, as I'm sure the Leader of the Opposition agrees, when we come together on matters like this, the Parliament at its best, and I appreciate the work that is being done to bring that to a conclusion. A sense of gratitude should pervade this place at this time of year. I want to thank the Premiers and Chief Ministers with whom I've worked over the course of this pandemic in this year, and we will meet again at the end of next week and then continue the important work of the National Federation Reform Council. I want to thank, Mr Speaker, again all the members of our Defence Force, not just serving in the Solomons but elsewhere around the world, and those
otherwise who are in those places. Mr Speaker, I want to thank all of those members who are retiring from this place at the next election and who have indicated that to this House, and we've just heard from the Minister for Health, but there are many others, and they will have their opportunities if some had, and I'd extend also personally my best wishes to the member for Fowler, Mr Speaker, with whom we've shared a good friendship over many, many years. But there are many others. I won't list them all, Mr Speaker. We know who they are, and we thank them for the great service to this House. Mr Speaker, I want to thank the Chief Government Whip, the member for Ford, who does a terrific job, and at a time as we were reflecting in our party room very recently. And for those members who have joined the House in 2019, this has not been a usual term. This has been an extraordinary term in terms of what members have had to endure, long separations from family, long times in isolation because of the various rules that have been put in place. The same opportunities to have that camaraderie and that direct support, one for each other, which is very customary in this House. And for those of us who have entered this House in earlier times, have benefited from that. I do feel for the class of 2019 on all sides of the House, Mr Speaker, who have had to seek to navigate their service in this place in a way different to those who came before them. And that has been very difficult for them. And I think they have felt at times quite vulnerable. And I want to thank the whips, certainly our whips, Mr Speaker, with Nick and Rowan as well, and the opposition whips, Mr Speaker, for the pastoral care and support that you have provided to the members here in this place. The job of the whip is just not to get us all in here to vote, Mr Speaker. The job of the whips are also to provide that care, counsel and pastoral support to members, and they do a terrific job, and I can think of none better than the member for Ford, who has one of the kindest hearts, Mr Speaker, in this place. Mr Speaker, can I also thank the clerks of the House. Clarissa, thank you very much, and the responsibilities that you've taken on, and to the Deputy Clerk and to the assistants. Mr Speaker, to the Sergeant-at-Arms, thank you for your work over the course of this year. It has been an interesting year for the Parliament, and all of those who serve our Parliament here, the attendants and so many others. Mr Speaker, thank you for the way you have worked, both with you as new Speaker and, of course, the former Speaker, the member for Casey, and the role that they have played. To the PM&C legislative team, to the House parliamentary liaison officers, Mr Speaker, my thanks to them, also in the Senate, the First Parliamentary Council, all of those staff who are, of course, retiring this year. The Deputy Clerk, Catherine Cornish, retiring this year after 27 years of service. The Department of Parliamentary Services staff, David Watt, retired after 8 years at the Parliamentary Library. Carla Turcic, retired after 25 years at Parliamentary Broadcasting. Michael Schild, retired after 26 years also at Parliamentary Broadcasting. They'll both be leaving quite a vacant space there to be filled by newcomers, Mr Speaker. And there are other retirees, Philip McCapian, Eric Horwood in Visitor Services, and Barry Smith, 14 years at the Hansard. He'd have quite a book, Mr Speaker, if he chose to write one. To the opposition and their staff, can I extend to you, the Leader of the Opposition and his family, the Manager of Opposition Business and all the opposition members and their staff, all the very best for the Christmas and holiday season. I hope they have a very safe and refreshing season, Mr Speaker. It will be a very busy year next year, as we all know. Of course, to my team, Mr Speaker, to the Deputy Prime Minister and his predecessor, can I say thank you very much for your friendship and your support and the great strength of the coalition of the Liberals and the Nationals. That's a coalition we want, Mr Speaker. The other coalitions that could occur on that side, not such a great coalition, Mr Speaker, the Labor and the Greens. But the coalition here, Mr Speaker, is a great coalition and has been in place for many, many years, Mr Speaker. I thought that'd get a reaction. But I'll return to the true tone of this, Mr Speaker. So thank you to the Deputy Prime Minister, to the Treasurer, Mr Speaker. I want to say thank you very much. A dear friend. We shared a house for a few weeks here, Mr Speaker, I didn't see a tape measure going anywhere near the curtains during that time, Mr Speaker, at the Lodge. Not once. Not once. Not that I saw. That's true, the member for Ballarat. But, Mr Speaker, I want to thank the Treasurer. He's a dear friend, as are my colleagues who I serve with. But you rely heavily on your Deputy Leader of your party, and this Deputy Leader has been such a great and loyal Deputy Leader, and I know he has worked closely with all of the colleagues in our Liberal Parliamentary Party and sought to support them and ensure that their interests and their issues have been raised and are well understood within our leadership. But a dear friend, and I wish him Happy Hanukkah, and I know he celebrates Christmas as well. So, Mr Speaker, he gets the best of both worlds there, at least the kids do anyway. So I wish you all the best. Mr Speaker, to the Deputy Leader of the National Party and to the Leader of the House as well, two great Queenslanders. I wish them well over the break and thank them for stepping up into the roles, particularly the Leader of the House and the service that he is providing us here. And I also thank him for the outstanding work that he's done since he's become Minister for Defence. He is a very long-serving Minister for Home Affairs and Immigration and Border Protection, and that is a series of lessons that we share. But as Minister for Defence, he has been a tower of strength. To the Leader of the Government in the Senate, Senator Birmingham, and the Deputy Leader, Senator Cash, Mr Speaker, thank you for their support in the other place. Can I also add a very personal thanks to the Minister for Foreign Affairs and the Minister for Women, the co-chair of the Cabinet Task Force on Women, Mr Speaker. I want to thank the Minister for Women and my dear friend Maurice Payne, Mr Speaker, for the tremendous work and support that he's provided to me, and also Jenny, Mr Speaker, as a close friend. Thank you very much. Mr Speaker, to all the coalition members and their staff, rest up, because next year we go forward together, as always, Mr Speaker, and making that boat goes faster, as we've always said. Mr Speaker, I wish them well and their families, and thank their families for all their many sacrifices over the course of this year. And those sacrifices, Mr Speaker, we will show next year together as a team how we come together to ensure that Australia continue to have the strong government and the good government that Australians deserve and need. Mr Speaker, I want to thank my Chief of Staff, Dr Jung Kunkel, and all of those who work in my great team there for their hard work and effort, and I know they're looking forward to a break. And particularly back there in the Shire, to Julie and all the team in my electorate office, thank you. Mr Speaker, there are many thank yous. The attendants, the Federal Police who look after us, particularly my own detail, and those who provide that support to, sadly, too many of the members of this place. We saw in the United Kingdom this year, Mr Speaker, the death, the murder of a Member of Parliament, and I know that reminded us all that in our service of our nation there are some risks that we perhaps underestimate. But, Mr Speaker, in that case we were reminded of those who keep us safe as members of Parliament in this building and when we're out and about doing our duty. To the catering teams, the library, the Hansard and the support staff, of course the cleaners, particularly Anna Maria, Mr Speaker, her sisters, and Lizia, thank you very much. They've been there a very long time. I'll continue to seek to be as tidy as I can. Mr Speaker, this has been a challenging and difficult year for our country, and to you, Mr Speaker, I wish you all the best and all the Speaker's panel for the work they have done here in this place. To the crossbenchers and to their families, I similarly extend my best wishes. The House is rising, but elsewhere in our country, Australians are facing down those floods, and our gratitude continues to be with them who are serving them. We might have been separated by borders for these last few years, but those borders are certainly lifting as our vaccination rates are at world high levels, Mr Speaker. We look forward to those being lifting, and we look forward to Australia continuing to open safely, so we remain safely open. Our hope and our prayer is for a quiet summer where there are neither fires nor floods. But if there are, Australians know that those who work across our government will be there to support them in their time of need. May it be a time of great peace, of renewal and refreshment, and may 2022 be a better year than that preceded it. 2021 is in the rear vision mirror. 2022 is the way forward, Mr Speaker. God bless and Merry Christmas to all.
The Leader of the Opposition on indulgence.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. Well, it's been a bit of a tradition to stand up and observe that it's been a tough year for Australians, and unfortunately that tradition continues because it has been a tough year. We've gone from drought to bushfire to pandemic and lockdown and now to flood. Australians are still living in caravans after losing their homes in the fires and now having to deal with the rains of La Nina. Farmers who got through the drought, and then we had the mouse plague. They saw things coming good, and now their bumper crops are getting smashed by rain. They're doing it tough. The thing that we've seen, though, during the pandemic in particular, is the resilience of Australians and their preparedness to make sacrifices for each other, for their families, for their neighbours. And I particularly want to thank those essential workers who've kept the country going during such a difficult time. We should value not just our nurses and our doctors and our police, but also I hope we never ever take our cleaners and the people who do so much work to keep the whole economy and to keep the whole society running. I hope that we don't take them for granted. I want to thank the community organisations like Addy Road in my electorate, Reverend Bill Cruz, other charities have really done it particularly tough and have helped so many people. I look forward to spending Christmas Day once again with Bill Cruz and 2,000 of our closest friends. It is indeed a wonderful occasion whereby people who are afflicted with homelessness, with addiction, with tragedy, and in some cases just lonely, have somewhere to go on Christmas Day. It is the true Christian spirit that Bill Cruz and Exodus represent, and this year they celebrate 50 years of providing service for some of the most vulnerable people in the inner west of Sydney, but wherever they come from, no one's ever turned away from Exodus there at Ashfield. I want to thank the Prime Minister for his words, and I wish him and his family and all the families of the members and senators all the very best for Christmas. To you, Mr Speaker, it's a bit of a tough job, isn't it, from time to time? Our job isn't necessarily to make it easier for you, but it is a tough job, and I wish you well. Thank you. And I reiterate my thanks for the former Speaker who did such an extraordinary job. To everyone else on the Speaker's panel, to our whip team led by the member for Fowler, we said good things about him before. That's enough, Chris. That's enough, mate. And Anna and Deb in the whip's office, and of course the members for Lawler and Werra who assist in that job. To my mate, the Deputy Leader, one can't have hoped for a more loyal Deputy Leader, good friend, someone who I've developed a very close relationship with, and someone who I think will make an outstanding Deputy Prime Minister at some time next year. To the Manager of Opposition Business, who I've known for a lot longer, the member for Watson, the longest-serving ever member for Manager of Opposition Business. He is a good person. He will make an outstanding Leader of the House. He does understand the standing orders, and I will forego my customary sledging of his band and his musical capacity on the basis of the Christmas spirit. To his deputy, the member for Hindmarsh, to my economic team led by Jim Chalmers and Katie Gallagher, who've done such outstanding work. In the Senate, we've got these three amazing women: Penny Wong, Christina Keneally and Katie Gallagher. They are just quite extraordinary, the work that they do. And my shadow minister assisting me in the Senate, Don Farrell, who I've come to rely upon very much for advice and wise counsel always. To all of our team, it's been a tough period to be in opposition. We had to come into the parliament and we supported every single piece of legislation that was put up during the pandemic, even though we regard some of it as being flawed. We said we wouldn't allow the perfect to be the enemy of the good because the national interest required that. And we did it. And we did it. Without exception, we did it, something that those opposite don't always acknowledge, but they are the facts of what happened. The fact is, though, that I think that our responsibility means we're competitive at the next election. We're competitive. Nothing more than that. But it's a tough time to be Leader of the Opposition, to be in opposition during a pandemic. Most oppositions around the country, I note Western Australia as an example, have not been competitive at all in the lead-up to an election. But we're in a position whereby we will continue to hold the government to account and will put forward our constructive alternative offer to the people of Australia at some time next year, be it in March or in May. To all of the parliamentary staff, the clerks, the Hansard staff, the Parliamentary Library, the Department of House of Representatives, the attendants, the hard-working folks at Aussies and the staff cafeteria, everyone working at the coffee carts who really keep us going, to the cleaners who do such an amazing job. To everyone here, particularly want to thank Joy, a cleaner who keeps my office presentable. Thank you very much. To the Comcar drivers and staff, especially my Sydney drivers Greg and Suzanne, who look after me so well. To all the Parliament House security and the AFP, we appreciate all that you do. And to our ADF personnel serving overseas, as we noted during question time, it is a particularly important time for us to thank them. To the press gallery, now we don't always agree, but it is an important role that you play in a democracy, and I certainly acknowledge that. To the state premiers and chief ministers for their leadership during the pandemic, I've made it a principle not to criticise any of the state premiers. I think they've had a really tough job, along with the chief ministers. To all the parents who've had a tough job too, dealing with remote work and remote schooling, often at the same table. I do want to thank my personal staff, led by Tim Gartrell, my Chief of Staff. Tim Gartrell was the campaign director in 2007. There's an omen there. And I think that he brings that experience, his experience as the campaign director for the marriage equality postal vote that was held as well. He's a class act. He's a good friend. He was my first campaign director way back in 1996 for Grainler. We go back a very long way, and when I became leader of the Labor Party, I approached him and cheekily said it was a condition of my continuing with that pursuit that he had to come, because that was the deal that we had come to some time ago before, when he talked me into running once before. Sandra Crowe, my EA, I thank you for making me go to the right place at the right time. We really rely upon our personal staff, but all of my team, Liz, who leads the media team, and Jeff, who plays such a key role in policy development. To all of them, I thank them very much. I thank my electorate, who without them I wouldn't be here. Simple as that. I love my electorate, the Inner West. It's diverse, it's multicultural, it's a fascinating electorate, it's a difficult electorate, it's a very political electorate, and I'm very proud to have lived there my whole life. To my son Nathan, he turns 21 next week, and I've been in politics his entire life. And when I talked to Greg Hunt about his family, we discussed it. It is difficult. But I I look forward to being home. I thank whoever did the parliamentary schedule for the fact that December 8 isn't a sitting day, and I look forward to that. I look forward to December 11, which is the party, and I hope that it goes well for him, and I'm very pleased that he's able to have one as well. I am very proud every single day of the young man that he has become. He's quite outstanding, and he's had a difficult time as well. Of course, he's studying business at university. He hasn't been onto campus since 2019. And like a lot of young people, the period of their lives in which they should have been having the most fun of their lives simply hasn't happened for them. And it's been a difficult period. To Jodie Hayden, my partner, we've spent considerable time apart this year, but I thank you for your friendship and your support. I do want to wish everyone a wonderful Christmas. May it be a time of reunions, of love, of happiness, of relaxation, and may 2022 bring us whatever we want in life. I guess people know what my wish is for.
The Deputy Prime Minister has the call.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I'd like to endorse the comments and thank all the people that the Leader of the Opposition thanked and the Prime Minister thanked, which leaves me with basically the cat and the dog and the rat and the roof to thank, because everyone else seems to be thanked. But starting off on a more serious note, I'd like to thank my family, obviously Vicky, who has been a great support to me, and Sebastian and Thomas, who have made this their home, so much so that at one stage Tom, after having a shower in the Deputy Speaker's office, decided we were standing there and we heard the door shut, and Luch managed to stop him just before he ran naked into this chamber, which would have been a remarkable addition to the parliament that day. To obviously my colleagues, I'd like to thank the leadership team of DLP, Bridget, to Drummy and Perrin for their hard work through the process, obviously to the Deputy Leader in the Senate, Matt, to Sam and Susan over there, to all our team here, to Michael, who I know it's been a tough year. I really thank you for the professional and diligent and decent way that you have acted, to Mark, to Pat, to Ken, to George, to mention Lou again, to Dr Dave, to Andrew, to Keith, Hogues and Michelle. It's been a great year to prepare for the next year, which will be an incredible year, and we are going to make sure that we give the best representation of ourselves, and hopefully we will all stay there, but that is the will of the people, and maybe bring a few others down here to Canberra with us. To the staff, the ever-patient staff, you've been such a professional team down here and in Tamworth, an incredibly professional team, and you carry me so well and you make me look vastly better than I actually am, and I thank you for that. I won't go through all their names because, as they know, I'm notorious at remembering them. To the support structure in this parliament, to all the people you don't think about, imagine all the calls the ladies down on the switch get, the phones, the absolute crazy people ringing them up, angry people ringing them up and trying to deal with it. If ever you get a chance, you should go down and just say good day to them. Obviously, to the people of New England and to the great part of New England that wanted to be its own state, and should have. There's still hope. They should have. You've been so patient, allowing me to go away and do other jobs. But I love the people of New England. I love the people of the state of Queensland who gave me an initial job. But to come home to New England and the support I get on the street and every corner of it, as we try to do our very best job for them, I really appreciate that. And I can't wait to get back after this and go back and do as best service I can in the spare time we have. And I've already mentioned the staff there. I won't go through all the opposition, but I will acknowledge the member for Fowler, Chris Hayes, who actually has been a good mate over a long period of time, and I wasn't there for you. I had another job to do. I was watching you on the screen. But here's one person that you can have absolute confidence in him, and you can go to him, say what you need, and it goes no further than Chris. So I thank you, Chris, and especially in tougher times that I've had in the past, you were a mate. To the media, I just have to mention here, you can make of it what you like. Thank you so much for your representation of our nation. The Fourth Estate is a vital part of our democracy, and if we don't have that, we don't have a democracy, and that's why I'm so fervent about trying to chip Facebook and the others to try and get some of the advertising revenue back in your direction, because you are the people who actually do the job. There is a certain group, there are a lot of people over Christmas who don't get time off. They work. They're the doctors and they work. They're the nurses and they work. They're the ambulance drivers and the policemen and they work. They don't get time off for Christmas, but they love their families just as much as ours, but they are dedicated to the task at hand. So I thank you for that and for the sacrifice that you're about to make. I also ask that Christmas is such a great time for so many, but the worst time for a few. For a few, it's the loneliest time of the year. It's a time where they realise that they are divorced, they realise they are widowed, they realise they are homeless, they realise they are away from anybody, and if you get any opportunity to reach out to those people, and I worked for a long time for Sir Vincent de Paul, then you will get more out of that than you would know. You will get more out of that small act of compassion than you would know. So I thank all those people who assist in that. Finally, the Australian people. You have to think of some group that involves everybody else. So I won't thank the people of the world, but I'll thank the Australian people for their tolerance of us. We are servants of them. This is their house. We merely work here. And so, to the Australian people who are about to go into the process of dealing with an election, we hope that we, in this adversarial chamber, which it is supposed to be, I thank them for the role that they play, all of them, in making our nation a better place. And I conclude with we have been welcome to country in our area. It goes through, starts with Yama, but I always remember the end, and it's Yarrambi Barai, which means walk with God. Walk with God. So I say in conclusion in Kamiroy, Yarrambi Barai.
Well said. I was going to make a speech on behalf of all those in Parliament, but if you work in the building, thank you very much for your service to the Commonwealth and also to the members of Parliament and senators. Thank you very much, and Merry Christmas. I have received advice from the Honourable the Prime Minister nominating a member to be a member of the Parliamentary Joint Committee on Intelligence and Security. The Minister.
I ask leave of the House to move a motion for the appointment of a member to serve on the Parliamentary Joint Committee on Intelligence and Security.
Is leave granted? Leave is granted.
I move that in accordance with the provisions of the Intelligence Services Act 2001, Mr KJ Andrews be appointed a member of the Parliamentary Joint Committee on Intelligence and Security.
The question is the motion be agreed to. All those that opinion say aye. Contrary no. I think the ayes have it. I have received messages from the Senate returning bills without amendment. I do not propose to read these messages, which will be recorded in the votes and proceedings. And I give the call to the member for Clark.
Thank you, Speaker. Speaker, I'm acutely aware that there's only minutes left for this parliament this year, but there's one very notable Australian who has not been mentioned this afternoon, and I seek to remedy that. So I seek leave to move the following motion: that the House 1 notes that Walkley Award-winning Australian journalist Mr Julian Assange remains incarcerated in Her Majesty's Prison Belmarsh in the United Kingdom, despite a British court earlier this year finding that Mr Assange could not be extradited to the United States of America for health reasons. B, the US continues to pursue Mr Assange and has recently been back in court in the UK, appealing the earlier decision to refuse the extradition. C, the reason for the US's determination to extradite Mr Assange is limited to WikiLeaks exposés in 2010 and 2011 of US war crimes and other misconduct in Iraq and Afghanistan and in Guantanamo Bay, including the release of the collateral murder video in which a US helicopter in Iraq gunned down innocent civilians, including journalists. D. Recent revelations in the media showed the Central Intelligence Agency developed plans to abduct and assassinate Mr Assange. And E. The continuing incarceration of Mr Assange and any extradition to the US would not only be a grave injustice but a severe threat to his health and life. 2. Calls on the Prime Minister to A. Speak directly with his counterparts in the US and UK to bring an end to this madness, including the US dropping all charges against Mr Assange and the UK allowing his immediate release. And finally, B. Speaker, commit to not allow the extradition of Mr Assange to the US from Australia.
Is leave granted?
Leave is not granted.
The member for Clark.
Then, Speaker, I move that so much of the standing orders be suspended as would prevent the member for Clark from moving the following motion immediately: that the House 1 notes that A. Walkley Award-winning Australian journalist Mr Julian Assange remains incarcerated in Her Majesty's Prison Belmarsh in the United Kingdom, despite a British court earlier this year finding that Mr Assange could not be extradited to the United States of America for health reasons. B. The US continues to pursue Mr Assange and has recently been back in court in the UK, appealing the earlier decision to refuse the extradition. C. The reason for the US's determination to extradite Mr Assange is limited to WikiLeaks exposés in 2010 and 2011 of US war crimes and other misconduct in Iraq and Afghanistan and in Guantanamo Bay, including the release of the collateral murder video in which a US helicopter in Iraq gunned down innocent civilians, including journalists. D. Recent revelations in the media show the Central Intelligence Agency developed plans to abduct and assassinate Mr Assange. And E. The continuing incarceration of Mr Assange and any extradition to the US would not only be a grave injustice but a severe threat to his health and life. And 2. Calls on the Prime Minister to A. Speak directly with his counterparts in the USA and UK to bring an end to this madness, including the US dropping all charges against Mr Assange and the UK allowing his immediate release. And finally, B. Commit to not allow the extradition of Mr Assange to the US from Australia. Speaker, there's no time for a rousing speech. Can I just simply say there is genuinely an urgent need to suspend standing orders and to deal with this motion, because as we sit here, an Australian citizen, an Australian journalist, is literally rotting in Belmarsh prison in London and could well die there. And if he is extradited to the US, to a lifetime imprisonment in a high-security supermax jail, he will certainly die there. Thank you, Speaker.
Is the motion seconded?
I second the motion, Mr Speaker, and given that the clock is running down, I'll be brief. The situation of Julian Assange should concern everyone. It sets the precedent that you can be a journalist exposing war crimes and find yourself ground down to the point where you may no longer be able to stay alive by some of the most powerful forces and some of the most powerful governments in the world. And to anyone who believes in transparency and people abiding by the rule of law, that should send a shiver down everyone's spine. It's also incredibly concerning because it raises the question about what does it mean to be an Australian citizen, and what does it mean for a government to effectively turn its back on one of its own and allow them to rot and be subject to not only legal proceedings but potential threats of abduction, of assassination and abduction, as the member for Clark has referred to in the motion. I want to commend the work done by all members of the Parliamentary Friends for bringing home Julian Assange, and also acknowledge the work of our Senator Peter Whish-Wilson in particular and Janet Rice in the Senate, who've been pursuing this matter there. Given the limited time, I commend this motion to the House.
I thank the member for Melbourne. The question is that the motion moved by the member for Clark be disagreed to. All of those of that opinion say aye. The contrary, no. The ayes have it. The ayes have it.